Imagine for a second that you found the secret, a secret about your parents that changed your entire legal identity. Well, for two siblings, Oliver and Roselyn Boquiren, that's not a hypothetical. It's exactly what happened. They uncovered a single fact that proved their birth certificates were wrong, and their journey to fix it went all the way to the Supreme Court, with the result that, I promise you, no one saw coming.
Okay, so let's walk through this family's timeline. It all seems pretty normal at first, right? Oliver and Roselyn are born, and a few years later, their parents get married. A month after the wedding, they're legally legitimated, which is a big deal. It gives them all the rights of children born inside a marriage. And for years, that's the story. But then, bam, 2015 hits, and they find out their dad was already married to someone else. That one little detail, it means their parents' marriage was legally void from the get-go. And if the marriage was void, so was their legitimation.
So you can just imagine, the siblings are now faced with this incredibly complicated family record. They realize their birth certificates, these official documents, are based on a legal fiction. Their entire status as legitimated children was built on a marriage that never legally existed. So what do? Well, they did the most logical thing they could think of. They went to court to set the record straight.
And their request was surprisingly simple. All they wanted was for the court to cancel that note on their birth certificates that said legitimized by subsequent marriage. Instead, they wanted to register an affidavit where their dad officially acknowledged them. The goal here wasn't to disown their father or anything like that. They just wanted the paperwork to match reality, that they were, technically, illegitimate children, but they were still proud to carry their father's name.
Now, you'd think this would be an open and shut case. They had stone-cold proof of the father's prior marriage. This just seemed like a simple correction. And at first, yeah, the justice system completely agreed with them.
Their journey started off great. First up, the regional trial court looked at the evidence, which was undisputed, by the way, and said, yep, you're right, and granted their petition. The government appealed, but then the Court of Appeals also sided with the siblings. They agreed the correction needed to be made. So that's two courts, two victories. It really seemed like the case was closed.
But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The government, through the Solicitor General, took one last shot and appealed to the highest court in the land. And this is where this straightforward story takes a sharp, unexpected turn. The Supreme Court reversed everything.
And this brings us to the central puzzle of this whole case. Why? If everyone agreed on the facts, everyone knew about the prior marriage, everyone knew the second marriage was void, why on earth would the Supreme Court block the correction? Well, the answer has absolutely nothing to do with the truth of their situation, and everything to do with legal procedure. The Supreme Court's decision really came down to two major points. The first one is pretty simple when you break it down. The siblings had all the right facts, but they were using completely the wrong legal tool for the job.
See, they filed what's called a Rule 108 petition. The easiest way to think about Rule 108 is that it's for simple, almost clerical fixes. It's for when you need to correct a misspelled name or a wrong birth date on a document. It's designed to be a quick, summary process to fix clear, factual errors.
And right here, you can see the problem. The siblings weren't just asking to fix a typo. By asking to cancel their legitimization, they were indirectly asking the court to rule on the validity of their parents' marriage. And that's a whole other beast. That's a declaration of nullity, a major legal action that affects status, property, the whole shebang. They were trying to use a scalpel for a job that required a wrecking ball. And this isn't some new idea. This quote from another case really hits the nail on the head. The Supreme Court has been firm on this. You cannot use the simple shortcut of a Rule 108 petition to attack something as fundamental as a marriage. Even if that marriage is clearly void, you have to challenge it through its own proper, direct legal process.
Okay, so that was problem number one, the wrong tool. But there is a second, arguably even bigger reason for the reversal. It's not just about how you bring a case, but who gets to bring it. This is all about something called legal standing.
The law on this is crystal clear. Article 182 of the Family Code says that a child's legitimation can only be challenged by people who are actually harmed by it, or, in legal terms, prejudiced in their rights.
Which leads to a very logical question that the Supreme Court asked. How could the Boquiren siblings possibly be harmed by their own legitimation?
And the answer is a resounding no. They weren't harmed at all. Legitimization is a legal benefit. It actually elevates a child's status, giving them more rights, especially when it comes to inheritance. For them to claim they were prejudiced would be like trying to sue because you won the lottery. It just doesn't make sense.
So if they can't bring this fight, who can? Well, the law is thinking about other heirs. Let's say, for example, children from the father's first valid marriage. Their inheritance share might shrink because a newly legitimated child now gets an equal piece of the pie. They would be the ones who are prejudiced. So, as the court saw it, the Boquiren siblings simply weren't the right people to be challenging this.
So the Supreme Court dismisses the whole case on these procedural grounds. But what does that mean for their birth certificates? Did the court just leave the inaccurate record as it was? Well, not exactly. They came up with a pretty unique solution.
This table really sums up the whole roller coaster ride. You can see how the lower courts were totally focused on the facts. The marriage was void, so the record must be wrong. But when it got to the Supreme Court, the focus shifted completely to procedure. They asked two different questions. Was this the right tool, and were these the right people?
And here's the final compromise. The court didn't cancel the legitimation like the siblings asked, but it did order the civil registrar to add a note, an annotation, to their birth certificates. This note simply states the fact of the father's 1987 marriage. So the original record doesn't get changed, but now the full, complicated truth is part of that record for anyone to see.
So, after all of that, what's the big lesson here? What are we supposed to take away from this family's incredibly complex legal journey? I think it's a powerful reminder that goes way beyond just this one case.
And it all comes down to this. In the world of law, having the truth on your side, having the right facts, is just not always enough. Procedure is absolutely paramount. The Boquiren siblings had an undeniable truth, but they couldn't get it legally recognized because, in the eyes of the court, they knocked on the wrong door, using the wrong key. It's a really stark reminder that how you fight and who is doing the fighting can be just as important as what you're fighting for.